She was deeply loved, chosen, desired. Yet every night Rachel lay awake with an ache no one else could see. Day after day she watched joy grow around her, while her own arms remained painfully empty. Jacob loved her deeply, but even love could not give Rachel the one thing her heart cried for. One day her pain erupted, raw, desperate, and unfiltered, forcing heaven to hear her cry. Before Rachel became a mother, before joy found her, this was the long road of waiting that shaped her destiny. Rachel grew up in a wealthy pastoral home, living in comfort and routine, unaware of how greatly her life would shape Israel's future. Rachel's home was full of work, learning, and tradition. Her family lived comfortably, rooted deeply in the shepherding way of life. She learned to manage animals and carry water from a young age. She was gentle and responsible, trusted deeply by her family. The well was the center of daily work. Rachel had drawn water here since childhood and knew every detail of the place. One ordinary afternoon, Rachel met a weary traveler named Jacob. That single moment would change the course of her life. Jacob realized she was Laban's daughter, his own relative. After weeks of travel, seeing her felt like a sign of God's kindness. Rachel ran home to tell her father. Laban welcomed Jacob with excitement, recognizing him as long-lost family returning. As days passed, Jacob grew deeply attached to Rachel. Her gentle spirit and warm character drew him closer each day. Jacob offered 7 years of labor to marry Rachel. His love made the years feel short, and he served faithfully every day. Brides were covered completely in thick veils. A groom often did not see the bride's face until the next morning. Behind the scenes, Laban made his own plan. He chose to give Leah first, using the heavy wedding veils to hide her identity. Leah did not design this plan, but she obeyed her father. Hidden under the veil, she was led out as the bride. The wedding happened at night, as was common. With her face fully covered, Leah was presented to Jacob as if she were Rachel. At dawn, Jacob saw the truth. The woman beside him was Leah, not Rachel. The shock filled the tent that morning. Jacob demanded an answer. Laban replied calmly, saying their custom required the older daughter to marry before the younger. Laban offered another deal. Jacob could marry Rachel too, but he must serve 7 more years after the wedding week. When Rachel heard what happened, the news cut deeply. Yet Jacob still loved her, and soon she would also become his wife. A week later, Jacob married Rachel as well. At last she stood beside the man who had loved her from the moment they met. Jacob now had 2 wives, and the sisters shared one household. Jealousy and comparison soon pressed hard on their relationship. Leah soon had sons, but Rachel remained childless. Her heart ached as she waited and prayed for God to remember her. Leah's family grew quickly, and her tent was full of little voices. Each new child reminded Rachel of what she longed for. Rachel felt left behind. Month after month passed with no child, and her heart grew heavier with each passing season. Her sorrow grew so strong that one day she cried out to Jacob, begging him for children or saying she felt she could not go on. As was common in that culture, Rachel asked her maid Bilhah to bear children on her behalf, giving her a way to hope again. When Bilhah had a son, Rachel felt her hope rise again. It seemed like her prayers were finally beginning to turn toward blessing. Seeing this, Leah also gave her maid Zilpah to Jacob, and more children were born. The rivalry between the sisters deepened. Leah continued to have more sons. Each child changed the rhythm of the household, and Rachel watched with a mixture of love and longing. Though children filled the tents around her, Rachel still felt the ache of waiting. She wondered when God would turn toward her. One day, Rachel bargained with Leah for mandrakes, a plant linked to fertility in their culture. Their rivalry reached a new point. Not long after, signs of hope appeared. Rachel felt something change within her, and she knew a child was growing in her. Scripture says God remembered Rachel. He saw her long years of waiting, and his compassion moved toward her at last. In time, Rachel gave birth. Joy and relief filled her heart after so many years of sorrow and tearful prayer. Rachel named him Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." Her joy was full, and Jacob was overjoyed too. Joseph grew bright and healthy. Rachel watched him with such pride, grateful for every moment after her long season of waiting. After Joseph's birth, Jacob knew it was time to return to Canaan. He planned carefully to move his large family home. Before leaving, Rachel secretly took her father's household idols. Scripture does not explain why, but it stirred tension later. Jacob gathered his wives, children, and flocks, and they set out for Canaan. Rachel walked beside her son, leaving her childhood home. When Laban learned Jacob had left, he chased after him for days. He was furious, especially when he noticed his idols were missing. Rachel hid the idols under her saddle and stayed seated. Laban searched everywhere, but he never found what he was looking for. Jacob and Laban made peace, setting a boundary stone between them. They promised neither would ever harm the other again. The road to Canaan was long, But Rachel walked faithfully with Jacob and her son. She leaned on God for strength each day. After years away, Jacob's household settled in Canaan. Rachel helped create a peaceful home with patient and loving hands. In time, Rachel became pregnant again. She carried this child with deep gratitude, though the pregnancy was harder on her body. As they neared Bethlehem, Rachel's labor pains started suddenly. The rough, uneven path made the journey even more difficult. Rachel's labor was long and painful. The midwife stayed close and encouraged her, but Rachel grew weaker as the hours passed. At last, Rachel's son was born. The midwife said, "You have another boy." But Rachel's strength was slipping away. With fading strength, Rachel named him Ben-Amoni, son of my sorrow. Her words revealed the depth of her love and her pain. Rachel's strength slipped away. Jacob stayed beside her, holding her hand as she took her final breaths near Bethlehem. In his grief, Jacob renamed him Benjamin, son of my right hand, choosing a name that carried hope and strength. Jacob buried Rachel near Bethlehem and set a memorial stone. It stood for generations, honoring her life and her legacy. Jacob mourned deeply, yet he kept moving for his children. Even in sorrow, he carried Rachel's memory in his heart. Jacob kept Benjamin close, knowing he was Rachel's last gift. He treasured the child with deep love and careful protection. As Joseph grew, he often thought about his mother. Though he was young when she died, her gentleness stayed with him always. Rachel's gentle ways shaped Jacob deeply. He led his family with the same patience and warmth she had shown. Through Joseph and Benjamin, Rachel's legacy shaped Israel's future. Her sons became central to the unfolding plan of God. Even as a child, Joseph stood out. Rachel's firstborn carried wisdom and confidence, traits that would one day shape Israel's destiny. Benjamin was surrounded by care. Though he never knew his mother, her love shaped the family he belonged to. Rachel's memorial stood for centuries. Her story was remembered not only for sorrow, but for faith, love, and perseverance. Through Joseph and Benjamin, Rachel became part of Israel's foundation. Her legacy shaped tribes, history, and God's unfolding story. Rachel's life teaches patience and trust. Her story reminds us that God sees every tear and honors every prayer in His perfect timing. Even in the quiet hills, Rachel's story lingers. God weaves her love and loss into the land her children will inherit. This valley shows how God can turn private pain into blessing. Rachel's hidden tears watered a future she never saw. The quiet camp shows how life goes on after sorrow, yet God stays near, guiding each small step of His people's journey. Across these plains, tribes will rise from Rachel's sons. Her quiet story becomes part of a promise reaching far ahead. As the light fades, we remember Rachel's faith. God does not waste our waiting. He folds each season into His good plan. Rachel's story leaves us with quiet reflection. God worked through both her joys and her sorrows to shape an entire nation. Her journey shows that God brings peace after struggle. Even in loss, His presence remains steady, gentle, and faithful. God's light still shines over Rachel's story. Her legacy, born in love, sorrow, and faith, continues in the great history of Israel. Rachel's sons became leaders of tribes. Her story flowed into Joseph's, into Israel's history, and into God's continuing redemption.